Hey y'all, Shanisha here with Living Corporate. As you know, we're about having real talk in the corporate world. With that in mind, before we get into this amazing discussion with Lionel Lee, we want to let you know this content makes mention of violence, which may be upsetting. So if you're listening with some little ones, discretion is advised.
What's up, y'all? It's Zach with the Living Corporate Podcast, and of course, you know what we do. We have interviews, conversations, right, that serve to amplify the voices of black and brown folks at work. And what do I mean by that? I mean, we typically have black and brown folks, leaders, executives, creatives, entrepreneurs, you name it, on the show having real conversations about real topics. And today is no different. We actually have with us today a very special guest. Very excited to speak with this person. Been in contact with him for a little while, and just finally excited to get him on the show, because we've been texting, and then we talk on LinkedIn, and then whatever. We've been trying to coordinate. Even today we were coordinating back and forth. Lionel Lee. Lionel Lee is the head of diversity engagement at Zillow Group. He provides career development support to underrepresented employees and works with executives to develop equity and belonging policies to improve employee experiences. He also serves as a connector between employees and community organizations. Prior to joining Zillow Group, he worked in talent acquisition, sourcing candidates across technology and banking industries. Okay, so really quick, y'all. All of that to say, he's by the people, for the people. You see what I'm saying? Okay. Helping communities has always been a constant throughout his life. Lionel has created and developed community groups that promote health and wellness. He's worked with HIV/AIDS education groups, substance abuse addiction organizations, as well as health groups for youth. Lionel has immigrated to the United States from Korea at age 5. His experiences growing up in South Central Los Angeles and later in the projects of Honolulu, Hawaii, I'm going to ask a question about that in a little bit, helped nurture his passion for community building. With all that being said, Lionel, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Now, look, of course, I got all these questions for you and everything, but the first thing I got to ask you, you talk about the projects of Honolulu. Hawaii has projects?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Honolulu has projects. And growing up there in the 70s and partial 80s, yeah, it was kind of rough, because most people don't know about that, because what they see about Honolulu and hear about Honolulu is that it's just a paradise, but it's not really a paradise for all. The level of poverty there still to this day is obscene. But back then it was like where I grew up in Kalihi. Kalihi is a town right outside of Waikiki. Yeah. And the projects are called Kuhio Park Terrace. We call it KPT, or Killer Park Terrace. Kill people today. That's what it was. And I lived on the 16th floor. And I had to actually walk up the stairs to get to my apartment because there was a young lady that got her head cut off in the elevator. So the parents would let the kids, catch the elevator. And then, you have the same stuff that you have in a lot of different projects. You have a lot of drug abuse, and, you have people defecating in the stairwells. So that was, you walked into every single day. Crazy thing is that the dude that cut off the woman's head lived 2 doors down from me. God. And he kept the head.
What?
He kept the head. But
whoa, I'm sorry. Wait. You said he kept the head?
He kept the head. It was a Cambodian dude, and he was just mentally disturbed. He just had some serious stuff going on, and he kept the head. And we found out like 2 weeks after it had happened. It was a very different kind of place, very violent. You can still look up. Actually, you can go on YouTube and look up videos from Kuhio Park Terrace, and they'll show you videos of what it's like at KPT to this day.
To this day, that is wow. That is shocking. I'm gonna tell you, Lionel, in your short 3 minutes of being on Living Corporate Podcast, you have given us the most gangster introduction we've ever had, and I'm not making light of anything. I'm very taken aback by this. Wow, what a
I don't have the typical, I don't have the pedigree of someone that's in my position. Definitely, I'm not. I just wasn't raised like that. I wasn't. I didn't think I was going to go to college. I didn't go to college. I didn't get a degree. I had to work and do all that kind of stuff. It's just I was given certain opportunities and took advantage of every single one. made the very best that I could. And I've always had a tremendous work ethic. Been out of my house since I was 17 years old. I lived in my car for like 3 days just so I can be out here, and just doing my thing. Just doing my thing and just trying to keep it moving.
Wow. Well, to start there. So let's talk a little bit about this. So you've started on that path, but kind of talk to us about your journey from Hawaii to the head of diversity engagement at Zillow. What did that look like?
I was a go-go dancer at one time. That was pretty weird. I've done everything, man. Like, I can do stuff around my house. Like right now, I'm remodeling my house, and my kids will be like, "Where'd you learn how to do that?" And I was like, "Man, it wasn't nothing about learning. I just had to survive."
Wait. So let's take a step back. You said you were a what dancer?
I was a go-go dancer for a little bit. Yeah. When I was like young, and that kind of stuff. And I was raised extremely religious. My grandfather is a Baptist minister.
Okay.
And I was raised in the church, so we didn't go out and do that kind of stuff a lot, and I went to like school dances every once in a while. I always liked to dance. So as soon as I got out of my house and, I didn't have nobody telling me what I could and could not do, I got caught up in the dance club scene for a while, and I was going there a lot. And a dude that owned the club, he asked me one day if, I'd want to just come in and, get paid for it. Right. But it was like, I don't know if you remember, I don't know how old you are, but
29.
There was just one dance that I was really good at. It was the prep. I don't know if you remember what the prep is.
No, what's the prep?
It's just a dance that, like a lot of black folks did, back then. I'd have to show it to you in order for you to know what it was. But people around my age group, they know what that dance is. And I was really good at it. And you can be extremely creative with it.
Okay.
So the dude just kind of, I didn't get paid like a lot. It was like that was my part-time gig. My full-time gig was, managing the Church's Fried Chicken, which was down the street from the club. Right. Wow. So after work at Church's Fried Chicken, I would shoot over there. And back then they would throw some, neon sweater or something on me, and then I get on there and, do my thing. So yeah, that's a snippet of my background. But the way that I got into where I'm at now is, funny thing is, I met a dude on a basketball court, right? Like when I was in my late 20s, and it was one of those stereotypical things. I got into a fight with this dude on the basketball court. You get in a fight on a basketball court, they find out you can fight, and then all of a sudden everybody want to be your friend, right? Yeah. So dude wanted to be my friend, who was a white dude, and I had never had too much interaction with white people, honestly, and definitely not on a personal, like friendship level. That just wasn't the way I was raised. So I was kind of cautious. And at that time, I worked for an organization called Street Outreach Services, and it was a HIV/AIDS prevention organization. It was led by this amazing sister from Brooklyn. Her name was Imani Wood. She recently passed like a couple of years ago. And I consider her one of the strongest individuals I've ever met, and was lucky enough to have her as a mentor for a very large portion of my life. But anyway, so she and I were working together, and then I came up with this crazy idea that what we should be doing is we should be documenting, crack addicts and crack dealers under the age of 18, because that's a group that we were not capturing. So the city of Seattle liked the idea, my organization liked the idea. So I ended up doing that for about 2.5 years. So I was going into crack houses and stuff like, 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, and dealing with the whole bunch of kids. And I dealt with the kids. I mean, I had one sister, her name was Beautiful, literally, and she was 13 years old. She was 13 years old with a baby, and she was a crack dealer. So, so I had to deal with that, and that kind of stuff is emotionally extremely taxing. And I just couldn't do it I couldn't put as much of myself into it as I was. So I was starting to get burnt out. And dude, he was a recruiter, this white dude that I had met, right? He was like, hey, you ever thought about like recruiting? And I was like, I don't even know what that is, man. And he brought me up to his office to show me what he did. And like a lot of young black men and young black women and kids that come from, lesser economic areas, when I saw a computer, I thought, nah, I can't do that, because, computers are magic, right? They're not meant for me. They're meant for like geniuses, right? Black kids can't do math, black kids can't do this kind of stuff. And I bought into a lot of that. I bought into a lot of that kind of stuff. But I had a 2-year-old child, so I had to do something, because I wasn't making enough money and I wanted him to have a better lifestyle than I did growing up. So I took him up on it, and I, shot across the bridge over into Bellevue from Seattle. And then I don't know if you know Seattle, but Seattle, you have East Side, West Side. And when you go across that bridge, man, it's completely different. Extremely affluent, very, very white. As a brother back in the, 90s, you couldn't be on that side if you weren't an athlete. Right? Or somebody else, that they recognized. Because if you were a black person that they didn't recognize, the cops would give you a hard time. Like literally, they would follow you around and stuff, right? But I went over there and I interviewed with like 9 blonde-haired, blue-eyed women, man, sitting around the table. I was like, man, I don't know if I want to do this. And they offered me the job, and I was like, whoa, what do I do now? And at that same time, I was actually interviewing with the fire department. And walking out of that office, I drove like this beat up 1984 Volvo, and when I say it was beat up, I mean, it was beat up. It was 100 and something thousand miles on it.
Oh, wow.
Paint was peeling, that kind of stuff. I put on the best clothes that I had at that time. It was a bucket. I mean, it was a bucket. And I'm walking out, and every car in the parking lot is like Mercedes, Audis, BMWs,
right.
That kind of stuff. And I was like, I don't know, maybe I can do this. And so I accepted and started there and struggled, man. I struggled a lot. I mean, I struggled so bad the first 3 months. It's a very large organization. It's called EDP, Contract Services. Now I think they're called TAC Worldwide.
Okay.
And it's one of the largest recruiting organizations in the world. At that time, I forget exactly how many people they had, but I know that at one time I was ranked like something like 2,000 something out of the company of recruiters. By the time I had to make a decision at one point because because I was basically told that I could be pretty successful in this if I got the street out my voice. Right. So I started turning like, I went home and was like frustrated over it, and, my girl at that time, she was pretty hood too. So she was like, we can sue them, blah, 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 blah. But I went to bed with my 2-year-old son, and I was like, man, I got to do something.
Real talk.
So I made up my mind. I made up my mind that, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do. And I walked into the office the next day. I got there at 6 o'clock in the morning. Nobody was there, and didn't leave till like 8 o'clock at night. And then I did that for like a whole year, and I became number 2 in the company. And my income went up something like 300% in a year.
Goodness gracious.
And so I figured out that, I can do this. And then I went to San Francisco. Right after that, I got recruited by a staffing firm there. Didn't like them too much, so I started my own staffing firm. We did $2.5 million in our second year of business, and that was just like 3 of us, right? And we added some people on and that kind of stuff. And then I came back to Seattle, and again, got recruited by another company. Became the manager of recruiting for a startup during the .com era. I was killing it there. And then the .com bubble burst. And then I went to Washington Mutual as their diverse executive recruiter.
Okay.
And that was probably one of the worst work experiences I've ever had.
What made it so
happened,
bad? Yeah.
What happened was that they wanted this person, but one of the head people in this department didn't want this person. They didn't feel the need for a diversity executive recruiter. So they waited for her to go on maternity leave, and then behind her back hired me, right? So
I see.
My first day of work, I'm walking down the hall, and this woman walks up to me, and she goes, "Who are you?" And I said, "Oh, I'm Lionel Lee." And she goes, "Well, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I run diversity executive recruitment here." And she just looked at me, and I got this, like, it was chilling. Like, this look was crazy. And then next thing I know, man, like 7 months later, 8 months later, maybe, close to a year later, the whole group was disbanded. And we all had to leave and, go do our thing. And it was kind of crazy, too, the way that they told you was, they asked you to come in for an early morning meeting. I went in for an early morning meeting, and they had HR there, and they said it's disbanded.
And then where does Zillow come into play?
2007 hit, man. 2007, 2008, 2009, and I went through all my money, and I had to get back to work, So I joined a really small recruiting firm that was, bull. They didn't know what they were doing. But then there was this other recruiting firm that I really wanted, and I went and joined them, and they were amazing. And that's one of the crazy things, too, is the dude that hired me, he's like this really young, comparatively. I mean, I think he's like, close to 40 now, Republican white dude, right? And he hired me on to the company. And I go in there, and I'm on the phone the first day, and he said, "Hey, Lionel, can I talk with you for a second?" I was like, "Yeah, what's up?" And he goes, "Man, who the hell is that on the phone?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Do you know you sound white?" And I was like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, when you talk to me normally, we're fine, but whenever you get on the phone, you sound white." And that's because of what I learned in the earlier part of my career. I was code switching. And I told him, "Well, that's how I'm." He goes, "Nah, man, I don't think that's why you're successful. I would really love to see you be you. I got enough white dudes in my office. That's why I hired you." Oh, okay. And then I started really trying to understand what just happened. And the reason I ended up here at Zillow Group, I stayed there for like 5 years, 6 years, right? And I ended up killing it there. Was always either number one or number two. And the reason I ended up here is that the person who had hired me on at Washington Mutual, she became the vice president of talent acquisition here at Zillow. And I started my own company after a while again, right? And she was one of my clients.
Okay.
And she asked me to come in, and she said, "Lionel, this is like 2016. Lionel, we're really trying to do this diversity thing, man, but we don't know what we're doing. Would you want to help us?" And I said, "Well, I can, put something together." I talked about it with them a little bit. They wanted me to do it. I couldn't dedicate time to it because I had my own staffing firm at that time, and my staffing firm was doing extremely well. But what happened was that it kind of grabbed a part of me that I didn't know really existed. My experience in tech as a black man was horrible. I mean, it was horrible. So I decided that, by doing this, I would be given an opportunity to better the experiences of other people that are underrepresented in the tech space, right? Because when I was starting out, there was no other. I mean, it was me. It was me, and I was probably the only one that I knew, with the exception of like one or two that worked in other agencies, but it was me, right? And it was horrible. I hated it. I mean, there's no way that I could tell somebody that, yeah, this is a good day. I woke up every single day begrudging going to work. And eventually I was able to push it down to the point where I didn't realize that, that there was a part of me that was always anxious.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I get a chance to change, within this organization. And then what I'm hoping for is that this organization will be, will be like a beacon for others to take a look at.
Star, yeah.
Right? What did they do to make a difference? Right? Because we changed how we are as a company. We've changed the way that we're perceived. People want to come to work here. That kind of thing. And, the brown and black folks here are much happier now than they were. We know that because I'm very data driven, and we took some surveys and things like that let us know that the things we're doing are working. But that's how I ended up in this position. And I was a consultant at first. And we talked about 20 hours a week. 20 became 40, became 60. It became an obsession, because I was like, ooh, I get a chance to
really move the needle some way. Yeah.
Yeah, not just move the needle, but, just we talk a lot in those kind of terms, right? Like move the needle, that kind of stuff. Right? And the way that I looked at it was never really like that. The way that I was looking at it was, improve the day-to-day experience of the underrepresented worker going into the tech space. That's my driver.
I love
right?
That. Yeah.
The way that I describe what I do is that my job is to make sure that everybody that comes to work is happy and feels like they belong. That's my job. That is my job. And I don't like to say I love my job because I don't think in that way, but I'm extremely proud of what we've done here at Zillow Group. I'm extremely proud, and I'm hoping to continue on this path and continue to make us an employer of choice.
I mean, what can I say? I mean, I hear you. This is incredible. Look, I have another question, but I want to get into this really quick though. You talk about some of the things that y'all are doing here, and like they've been surveying well. What are some of those things that you've been able to do at Zillow that you believe have helped to improve the sense of belonging and inclusiveness for Black and brown folks?
Well, that was the thing, right? Because one of the things that they had asked me to do is go out and find best practices. And the crazy thing is that there were no best practices because nobody was really killing it. Nobody's numbers said that they were killing it. Right? So I had to come up with my own stuff. But what that gave me was green field. So I can do a couple things. So one of the first things that I did is I was walking through the office one day and we had this wall of speakers, right? And the speakers, I looked at that wall and it's a pretty big wall of all these, headshots of all these speakers that we've had come into the office. And I was like, damn, every single person on there is white. Like literally, like every single person on there is white, except for one brother that we had. And of course, he was a football player.
Of course.
Right?
Of course.
Like, come on, man, so I changed that immediately. That was one of my goals, to change that. And I did that. We brought in people like Van Jones. We brought in people that were from the Islamic community. We brought in people from the Latinx community. Totally changed that whole landscape, right? And then we started talking about like just simple things like events, because that's one of the things that tech companies are known for, right? We have these crazy ass parties and everybody has a good time.
Yeah.
But not everybody gets down like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I didn't grow up that way. I don't go out and, I'm not one of those people that like to imbibe in that way. And that's how I party. That's not what I do.
Right.
I like the music. I like to dance. I like that kind of stuff, and not saying that we're all the same, but there are certain foundational pieces that make us a little bit the same, us Black folks, right? And so we started throwing like parties, but I would tell the dudes that came in, I started going out and creating relationships with external organizations that were representative of underrepresented groups within our company. So we had professional organizations that I went and made agreements with, and then they would come in and they would throw the parties. And they asked me, they said, well, how Black do you want this to be? I was like, I want it to be as Black as you want to make it.
Right. It needs to be black with a Q.
It needs to be, because you have people here from, predominantly Black areas, right? You got a kid that grew up in a predominantly Black area. He goes to an HBCU, does really well there. And then all of a sudden he's thrown into this, right? Where he's one of, I think we're at like 9% or something like that, right? We're still in that area, right? And then he's just got to like hang out and do what these guys do. Why don't we give him some of what he had back home? Why don't we create a sense of community for him? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we did that. And then we started taking a look at some of the things, and it's all from my own experience, right? One of the things that that really bothered me is like when all the brothers was getting shot, I felt completely alone in the office and I had nobody to talk to about it, right? And what we did is we created a forum here where people can, when things like that happen, for example, when the El Paso shooting happened recently, we had a forum here inside the office where people from the Latinx community can get together, along with people that were not from that community, but allies that were in positions of power and strength here at the company. We all got together and we had a conversation, and we, basically videotaped everybody in from all the other offices. And we had this, straight up conversation about what this feels like. And that made a difference in people's experience, right? But then we talked about how do we do our recruiting. I started taking a look at how we do the recruiting in the first place, right? Many of our people that come on board come on from internships. So how do we affect that? Well, we start creating relationships with organizations that are representative of us. So we start a relationship with NSBE, National Society of Black Engineers. We start a relationship with SHIP, Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, right? And then we put into practice talking to the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer, who is just, he's cool. He's just really cool. Right. And I gave him an aha moment when I took him to Afrotech like 2 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Shout out Afrotech. Shout out Blavity. Yeah.
Yeah, by Blavity, right? And I took him, he was one of the only white dudes there. And I was like, look, I'm going to introduce some people. You're going to have some good conversations. And then we're going to talk about it afterwards. It's like, cool. But he walks in and there's thousands of black people, man, where people are telling him, oh, we can't be found, which is bull.
It is, man. No, it is. It's so annoying, Lionel. It's annoying and it's insulting and it's racist, right? So you say it is. So you say, well, we can't find this talent, this one. Like, look, we're all over. And like, look, Afrotech is an obvious one, but man, there are also like a lot of like local, right, groups, right? Like there's all like if you go to any major city, there's some grassroots coding group that is black and brown, right? And honestly, even if you just take the time and look in the PWIs that you recruit in, if you just look one more time, they're there too. It's like, we're here.
Right. And then, so what we did, he saw that and he came back and he was like, what do we do? And I said, well, let's figure out some strategies. And what we started doing is that we started making, because Boeing's been doing this forever, but Boeing's been going to NSBE and making offers on the spot, right? And so it's like, okay, well, let's do that. And we started doing that and we started increasing our numbers because of that, right? And then those kids that were coming in as interns, we started converting them to full time. And then on top of it, their experience as workers here is real cool because like I walk by, I'll talk to them and be like, hey, what's happening, brother? How you doing? And they'll look at me like.
Even that alone, which is small, right? That's huge.
It's small. It's really, really small, but it's so important, right? People got to feel like they belong. People got to feel like they're appreciated, right? That's what has to happen. Man. And that's what we started doing. That's one of the things. I can go on and on, man. When I say I'm proud of the work that we've done here, I'm extremely proud of the work that we've done here. And
rightfully so.
The executives have been fully on board. We also do this other thing where we understand that the C-level, the C-suite has to be on board. So we do a thing called the EMB Learning Series, which is twice a month. We get together, myself, the Senior VP of Community and Culture, and some other key individuals that are well-versed in this space. We'll get together with a bunch of people from the C-suite, and we'll sit down and we'll talk for about an hour and a half about whatever it is, right? It could be a current event that has impacted an underrepresented group, or it could be about something that they've encountered themselves, right? They want to know more about, right? So we work with them and they get to learn. They get to learn what's happening. And it changes their perspective and it changes the way that they go out and approach things and make decisions, right? We have our CEO. Our CEO is like one of the only CEOs where, in his signature file, he has his pronouns, right? Right. Because that's important, to understand that not everybody identifies in that way. Understanding that people identify differently is extremely important because it puts you in a different place in your learning and your journey. And that's how we got here. I mean, there's, I can go on and on, but that would take up your whole segment.
Well, no. This is great. And look, Lionel, we'll just have you back. It's not a problem, man. We'll just have you just come on back. But this is it's interesting really quickly about the pronoun point, right? So, some research that Live in Corporate has been doing, on our white paper, if you check us out on the website, you'll see us on there. And we talk about the fact that, 14% of millennials identify as trans and non-binary, right? So it's a real statistic.
It's a real statistic. I mean, it's real. And, there's so many different groups of people that do not feel like they belong. They just, especially with the current climate in our country today, that kind of stuff, the divisiveness of our country today. We want to make sure in our company, and we've been voted like one of the best places to work forever, right? Forever. But what was not being considered was that not everybody felt that way. It was not the best place to work for everyone. Mm-hmm. We found that out through our data. We pulled some data that showed us that. So our goal is to make this the best place to work for everyone. And we look at everyone and make sure that they're taken care of. And we started our ERGs here 2 years ago. We dedicated a lot of resources to it. It has its own program manager that manages everything. That's his full-time gig. That's what he does to make sure that they're good. We have all the infrastructure in place for that. They're fully capitalized. We do. We do a lot of stuff here that a lot of companies don't do. And I think a lot of it just has to do with the fact that we didn't follow any best practices because, like I said, we didn't find any. So we had to create our own.
No, that's incredible. And this is the thing. It's so interesting because as commercialized, and I'm going to say it, colonized as diversity and inclusion has become, right? Like as a space, when it comes to actually delivering and doing the work, we're still very much so in our infancy, right? Like there's not a blueprint for anything.
No, there isn't. And I would agree with you that there's a lot of stuff in our space that, I kind of look at 3-4 times too. Really, that's what we're going to do now?
Right.
That's what we're going to do. But, that's the thing is that, let's be creative. Let's figure it out. And for me, it was very personal. That's why, a lot of the stuff that we did here was me imagining me, sitting there at work. What would I want? When I first started in this stuff, what would I want? I'd want to be able to come into work and feel like I can be the best me possible, right? But I don't have to play by nobody else's rules about how I talk, how I walk, or all those kind of things. I don't believe that people should or can bring their whole selves to work. I don't believe in that. I think that, there's some you need to leave at home, right? I don't need, like my grandmother used to tell me, tell some, keep a lot. You know what I mean? You don't need people knowing everything.
No, you know what?
Right?
Yeah, keep going.
At the same time, you should be able to be comfortable when you go to work. You shouldn't have to code switch as much. You shouldn't, have to wonder about your place there as much. You know what I mean?
I do. No, you're 100% right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we did.
I love that. You said share a little bit, keep a lot, but you're right though. And some of that, Lionel, is cultural, right? You're right. So I would say black and brown folks, and I'll just speak from my experience. I was raised, you keep your business to yourself, right? There's certain things. Yeah. Whereas then, there's stereotypes that white folks love to just tell everything they got going. They'll talk about the medication they're taking if they're depressed, and they'll share everything. But you're right. I'm not tripping on. I don't have to necessarily my quote unquote whole self. I don't have to do that, but I should feel comfortable, right? I should feel comfortable. I should not feel uncomfortable and dread going to work or feel like, man, just so otherized to the point where I can't even function.
Exactly. And being othered is real. And it's difficult for people to see that, we're paying you, you're, I don't know why you don't feel appreciated, it's that kind of stuff. And it's like, man, if I'm coming into work and I can't wait to get home, not because, I just don't want to be at work for whatever reason, but just because I don't feel comfortable. And when I get home is when I feel comfortable.
That's a problem.
You know what I mean? Or I'm dreading going to a company event because I don't feel comfortable. That's a problem. That's a problem. That's why there's more brothers and sisters that are consultants than full-time employees.
Man,
in the tech space.
Listen, oh my goodness. So look, Lionel, you're gonna have to come back because I got 4 more topics we can talk about. But you're 100% right? You think about it's these temporary, transient roles, right? That give you space, but then also but they give you space to kind of to move around and not get too uncomfortable in these environments. Not to mention the pattern where I'm seeing a lot of black and brown folks are in these non-client facing positions. You'll typically put them in the security tech roles.
Right.
But let me not step on too many toes today. Let's keep going though, because I want to respect your time. Let's get into how you and I connected. So of course, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm active on there. But I see you on there and you send me a link about a project you're working on, which really got my attention. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, as well as, and just kind of your passion and interest as to why you're doing the work that you're doing on it.
Yeah, I think you're referring to the microaggressions survey that we sent out.
That's right.
So Rebecca Bastian is the VP of Community and Culture here. She's my boss, right? I have a direct line to her and then a dotted line to the Chief People Officer. She and I sit right next to each other. It's an open kind of space. And she's a contributing writer for Forbes. So she was writing this thing on microaggressions, and I was like, let me read that. And I read it, and it talked about microaggressions towards women, right? And more microaggressions towards women. And I was like, man, that's crazy, because we suffer from microaggressions. And she was like, you do? I know that. And I was like, yeah, I know you know that, but, there's no data around it. Why don't we do our own survey? Because we couldn't find no data, right? We did the research or whatever, and she was like, yeah, I would love to write something on that, but, I can't find any data. And I said, well, let's create our own data. So she put a survey together, and I sent it out to my network, which is pretty broad. And then that's one thing I want to thank everybody for, including yourself. Many of them sent them out to their networks too. Like, hey, this is happening. Let's talk about this, right? And I came back, and I think we're going to try and do this like yearly and try and go even deeper, because I think that it was a great introduction, but I think that we could have covered a couple areas that, people really don't want to cover. But it's important, right? Because I know that I suffer from them still today on a daily basis. I have to check somebody in a meeting, or, and I also have to be, mindful about certain things, right? And, that they don't have to. When I say they, I mean like white folks that are in my same position or at the same level that I'm at, right? And we still go through it, and it's difficult. It's difficult, and we had to put that information together ourselves because we couldn't find any.
Well, to that point though, why do you think that IND programs? So I have a bevy of my own theories, right? But why do you think when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we don't zoom in on black male or brown male experiences specifically?
I don't think people really want that wake-up call yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
I think that people want to imagine that, hey, they got to this particular spot in their career, they're making this particular amount of money, they should be happy, right? But they don't know that for a lot of us, we have to deal with on a daily basis that they never have to deal with. But nobody really wants to put light on that, because then that would mean that we have to do some more work. And I think people don't want to do that. I think that, people try and find the easiest and fastest way to get to a certain point, right? But when we're talking about something that's this complicated and this nuanced, it's going to take some work. It's going to take some serious work. And, the implicit bias trainings and all that kind of thing. That's not enough. That's like tip of the iceberg.
No, 100%.
Nobody wants you.
No, they don't. And it's aggravating too, because even so, and I've talked to, in my current job and then at previous jobs too, but like I have mentors here. And I've talked to folks about, look, the challenge, what I find it frustrating about us always running to implicit bias is that it makes the presumption that all bias is accidental or unconscious, right? And it's like, no, some of y'all actively don't want black and brown people here, right? Come on, let's not, come on, it is the age of our Beyonce 2019. We know the deal. we know where people line politically. Like more than ever, we have direct insight into people's political ideologies, beliefs and points of view on race, gender, sex, religion, sexuality. Like we know all these things. So let's not act like everything is, I stumbled across this racist thing. Like, come on, that's not the reality. So let me ask you this, because as we kind of wrap up, what are some of the challenges that you've come across as a black executive leader within an IND space? Because you're the second person. You're only the second person in one of these positions that I've met that is a black man, Yes, working with so you're in this position, right? Typically, I see folks in this position are white women, and maybe even white women who identify as LGBTQ, right?
Right.
But what, as a black man, what does influence and coalition building look like in your position?
Influence and coalition building in my position. Well, one is, you got to have allies. I don't believe that we're in a position right now that we have a power right now to be able to make the change that we need to make without powerful allies, right? So, but at the same time, those powerful allies are working with biases themselves. So you need to make sure that you're training them up, mentoring up with them to make sure that when they are supporting you, that they can support you effectively and they know where it's coming from. I agree with you in many ways that I don't necessarily think, let me change that. I don't believe that bias is a strong enough word, for one thing. Two, I don't believe that it is all implicit. I do think that some people are just that way. And they just believe, all the propaganda and rhetoric that has been going on in the United States forever about us, right? And
right.
Coalition building really means getting rid of some of that, doing the behavioral change and thought change is important. That kind of thing has to happen before people can really try to support you, because they have to understand that they are being affected and their actions are being affected by things that they've been taught for most of their lives in the United States. United States, man, this is a country built on racism. It's a country, that built on the backs of us, whether you're Asian, Latino, Native American, that's what this country's built on.
Straight up.
To this day. Right? To this day. And we have to get to a place where we recognize that. We have to get to a place where we're not okay with it. It is something that we're ashamed of, but it's something that we're going to admit, right? That this is what's going on with us. And we need to move forward from here. That's coalition building. Getting people to really understand the mistakes that were made, fess up to them, own up to them, make some changes. Right? You can't do that otherwise.
Man, I love it. And this is the thing. You're the first person who I've had a conversation with who talks about the fact that coalition building is not only bringing things in, but also pushing things away. Right?
Yes.
It's both and. I love that.
Absolutely.
That. Well, look, let's do this. If you had 3 points of advice for any leader seeking to specifically recruit and engage black men, what would they be?
Make sure that what you want to invite them to is welcoming of black men. Do that, right? I mean, don't ask me to come to your house if your house is falling apart. Don't do that, right? Make sure your house is right first, right? Make sure that you work with recruiting to help them to understand that, yes, they are out there. You're just going to have to work a little bit harder. Make sure that you work with your executive staff to make sure that they're on board with whatever programs that you put in place so that you can make sure that you keep people once they get there.
I love it. And just like that. Now listen, y'all, you heard Lionel's advice. So look, we looking at you now. So you going to come around trying to invite black and brown men to your organizations. And we looking back at you like, look, don't play yourself. Pay attention. This has been great. Lionel, before we get out of here, any parting words, shout outs?
No, man, thank you for having me. We got a lot of work to do. We're nowhere near where we could be. And a lot of this is about the economic divide, the wealth gap. And it's just going to get wider and wider and wider. We got to get on, our bikes, man. We got to get to work. We got to get to work. We got to get to work.
Well, they're projecting that the median wealth of black families from a household perspective will be $0 like by 2050 or so. So you're absolutely right. We got it, man. Lionel, this has been, I'm like no shade to everybody else. This has been top 2 dopest conversations we've had on Living Corporate. Thank you so much for being a guest. We very much so want to have you back. We'll talk about that offline. Until next time, y'all, this has been Zach. You've been listening to Lionel Lee at the Zillow group. Make sure you check out all of his information, links in the show notes. Catch y'all next time. Peace.
Living Corporate is a podcast by Living Corporate LLC. Our logo was designed by David Dawkins. Our theme music was produced by Ken Brown. Additional music production by Antoine Franklin for Musical Elevation. Post-production is handled by Jeremy Jackson. Got a topic suggestion? Email us at livingcorporatepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us online on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and living-corporate.com. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned.